How's it going? It's Justin McDonald here with another results replay. And you can go to https semicolon slash slash, you know how to put that in the computer, results-required.com if you'd like to sign up to the mailing list. So think of selling as an influence, right? And think of marketing as storytelling. And I swiped this from Joel Polish, and all kinds of things were flooding my mind when I was reading that. So there's different ways to look at it. Like you could say testimonials on somebody's website or Yelp reviews could also be a form of storytelling. And if one was inclined and influenced to go eat somewhere or to do business somewhere based on features and benefits of whatever it is that they wanted, well, what would be an influence in driving the sale would be the marketing, which in that case would be storytelling. How many times, ladies and gentlemen, especially guys, you're like, I'm so hungry, I'll eat whatever, I'll find something at any restaurant and I'll eat, I don't care. And then girlfriend or wife is like, I checked out the Yelp reviews, we eating there. So do you see how storytelling, you know what I'm talking about, right? So you see how storytelling is huge when it comes to selling. And, you know, just about everything can be broken down this way. Like, what if you were to look at sports balls for a second? Like, basketballs, baseballs, softballs, tennis balls, golf balls. Now, what if pretend it was your job, right, to sell all these different sports balls, right? And the only thing that you needed to do to sell it to somebody that, let's say they were not from this country, or that they didn't speak English, they weren't from America, and they were not sure what sports were. They just see that you have all these different size balls, right? And they would be like, and your job again would be to describe what they are. That would really be like the biggest thing you need to do to sell. Now, maybe that person is a we'll say is a parent, right? And they're buying, they want to get their kids into activities and sports, and they go to a store and they see a basketball, a baseball, a tennis ball, a golf ball, and they just, all they know that it involves play. And maybe the kid is even watching other kids swing bats and bounce basketballs and throw footballs, and the father, maybe, and the mother too, are just like, they don't understand. So what that person might be doing in that case, all they have to do would be to describe, maybe if they were like describing each individual sport, they could kind of demonstrate maybe through a story, like, oh, this is how you throw a football, this is how you swing a bat at a ball, this is how you hit a tennis racket, this is how you swing a golf club. And then maybe if you wanted to take a step further, you would be able to show somebody like maybe some kind of video or something, like, oh, here's this famous person slam dunk, here's somebody, some famous athlete throwing a football, swinging a bat, hitting a tennis racket, all that stuff. You would show like the best celebrities, and you're like, and then that person, the parent, is like, astonished. They're like blown away because they're like, whoa, like, it's like this story of seeing others do that is like what inspired them to like be like, oh, okay, like they might then see their child being like the next athlete or next star, and they're like, well, we need to get our child a set of golf clubs and golf balls. We need to get him into football. We need to get him into basketball. Get a basketball and a basketball hoop for the house. You know, like maybe same thing with baseball. But like, if like I said, if it was a parent or parents that had no idea about not only the functionality, but like, you know, the stories that were behind all those different sports, it wouldn't be relevant enough for them to want to make a purchase. So you can expand on that too. Like think about like in the '90s, we're talking about basketball, but think about like Air Jordans. Were I'm sure they're still popular now, but those shoes were very popular in the '90s because of Michael Jordan. Now, same thing. Maybe somebody that's not familiar with American culture would see that like, oh, like I want to get a sports shoe. I want to get a basketball shoe. And there might be other basketball shoes made by other companies, and they're just like, you know, they're almost like willing to just buy whatever it is, just whoever has like basically a better story. They're not saying that, but like when when you see like the hype that was behind Air Jordans, some people might have been influenced to buy it because they saw other people buying it, right? And that was like the selling part of it. They're like, oh, I got to get these Air Jordans so I can be cool because I hear other people. I mean, that there's a story there too. That's another story. But like once one is educated on like, oh well, Michael Jordan was this great basketball player, and he's endorsed these shoes. So that is what like that story of like what Michael Jordan went through, what is what drove, is what was the core of driving the sale. You know what I mean? Otherwise, it's just a shoe, and I mean they even had some pump, like you pump it with air or something like that. And I don't know, I guess like people thought that like you could jump higher or something like that, but it was really like the story, this fascination that came with a story that made it, people believe, I guess, that if you just pump this air into a shoe that you're going to jump higher like Michael Jordan did and start having slam dunks just out of nowhere. So, there's other instances too. You can like go forward or back in time, but if a certain writer was like using a special, like typewriter or had a specific style pen, I'm sure people would flock to getting Pilot pens or something like that. If there was like a special author that was, or artist or lyric writer or some poet that used a certain pen, people would you know what I mean? The story behind that would definitely drive sales. Um, you can think of uh, cars, for instance, too. I was actually made me think of pulling out my bootleg version of Eugene Schwartz Breakthrough Advertising. But I know that the reason why I picked this out too is because for a while too, there's cars that would have the same engine as sportier cars, like Oldsmobiles or Buicks, and the sportier cars, the only difference was like this story and this appeal that it had, and it's just so fascinating that like, you know what I mean, like their parents or their grandparents were driving the same car basically engine wise, and it just had a different shell around it, and stuff like that also definitely sells. It's kind of part of that whole story too. Um, I know that somewhere in this book too, it talks about spark plugs, and like if you think about spark plugs, I mean, people will need a spark plug because they're influenced by the fact that they would need one, like based on maybe some the misfires that are happening in their engine. But like a nice story, like that was an example in this book right here, would drive the sale because like like it people just have a more emotional attachment when they like read a story versus just like having all the other options that are bland. I circled that too. In Boston, the number one tea drinking city, the number one tea is Salada. See, because it says in Boston, the number one tea drinking city. So people like might think like the Boston Tea Party or whatever, and maybe that's why they use that in the ad. Boston, number one tea drinking city. So they say the number one tea is Salada. Like, do you see how if they were just like on the shelf with all the other teas, most that didn't know that story would just find there'd be other influential factors that would probably drive one to want one tea or the other. But if they saw this ad like in Boston, the number one tea drinking city, they're like, oh wow, tea drinking connoisseurs like this tea. Why don't I go for that? So when you see that, like when you're talking about connoisseurs, like the connoisseurs, um, and like the aficionados of like anything flock to a certain brand or kind, there's usually a story behind it too, which is what drives there being more of a sale. Um, like back when cigarettes were a thing, like the Marlboro Man, right, would be some kind of an attractive character that they would use to sell cigarettes because he might have been like this outlaw western cowboy smoking a cigarette, but like they put that cowboy in there intentionally too because they know that this cowboy is like this guy living on the edge with adventure and all this stuff. So it's like, and I'm sure like most cowboys don't live boring lives, right? So like that's why they would specifically use a cowboy for their ads because they know that like everybody, especially back then, right? Like when you could sell cigarettes like that too in ads, they knew that younger generation, even like actually throughout all those generations in that time period, had a certain vision or illusion of what like a cowboy is, because of there's so many cowboy stories like in literature and film and audio that that it was way less gimmicky than using like a rabbit to sell batteries or a camel to sell cigarettes because like that the Marlboro Man has got so much like layers and mystery and curiosity attached to it and stories. The biggest thing is the stories too. Like there's like almost like unwritten stories where people just put the story in their head because they think of a cowboy. You think of all the stories that a cowboy goes through. Well, right above that one too, it says Jake LaMotta. He was a popular boxer, 160-pound fighter, fails to flatten mono paper cup. You like that one? Jake LaMotta, 160-pound fighter, about my size, fails to flatten a mono paper cup. So like they're trying to sell you on the strength of this paper cup, and this heavyweight champion, well, heavyweight, I guess he would be a lightweight champion, uh, can't flatten this paper cup. I love that one. But of course you would need to know a little bit about who Jake LaMotta is, but um, you know, back then you didn't really have to have a disclaimer explain who Jake LaMotta was. I'm sure it was a very household name back in those days. Hair coloring so natural, only her hairdresser knows for sure. Miss Clario. See? See how like this, see how it's like the fear of a story drove the sale too? Like nobody will ask her what the story is except for her hairdresser. So that's what so it's kind of funny, like the psychology is almost reversed. They're like, well, I don't want anybody knowing I'm using this product because it's going to incite a story. It's going to make people ask me they're going to ask questions. And I'm going to be forced into telling a story. And this lady's like, I'm going to use this hair product. That company's still around too, I think. Miss Clariol? I don't know, I'm pretty sure it is. Tastes like you just picked it. Dole. And Dole's talking about their fruit that they probably put in a can, right? Mostly. And, you know, like you just picked it. Like your mind starts wandering into a field where you see people picking, or particularly you are at a pick your own farm, grabbing your own apples and pineapples and berries, and see how that story, they're trying to take that story and can it up, right, pun intended, for their little slogan there. Oh, how about this one? At 60 miles an hour. At 60 miles an hour, the loudest noise in a Rolls Royce is the electric clock. That's a really good one. You hear that one? You've heard that one before. At 60 miles an hour, the loudest noise in a Rolls Royce is the electric clock. So you gotta think too, like an electric clock, you can almost hear that one. Click, click. So you gotta think, that is the loudest noise at 60 miles an hour in a Rolls Royce. Do you see how that tells a story? I love that one. Here's another good one. The amazing story of a Zippo that worked after being taken from the belly of a fish. Right? A lighter is just a lighter. But this is the amazing story of a Zippo that worked after being taken from the belly of a fish. Anywhere you go, Hertz is always nearby. Anywhere you go, Hertz is always nearby. So it's letting you tell this. It's letting you tell the story in your head, and Hertz is always going to be nearby to hook you up. Don't worry about it. You're like, yeah, but what if I was Hertz is there? But what if I had to go? Hertz is over there too. Good one. Now let's do one more here. I just randomly opened this bootleg version of breakthrough advertising I got that I printed out. I don't know. Thirst knows no season. In a winter ad at a time when cold drinks were only consumed during the summer. Coca-Cola. Thirst knows no season. Yeah, because like Coca-Cola did a bunch of things with polar bears and stuff like that after, but like, you know, like that was an interesting challenge for Coca-Cola at that time. Like once the summer wore off, right? Like how do we get people to keep drinking Coca-Cola all year round. So they were forced. They're forced into. They're cornered into a wall, and they're like, we need to find. We can't create desire, right? Our copy can't create desire, but what we can do is we can create stories, even if we fabricate them, right? We make up stories. We have stories. At least we can make the best attempt to get people to visualize that Coca-Cola should be in their life all year round. And my golly, did they do that. So that's all I have for that. So let's tie this up for a moment. Now, can you think of different things that you've bought in before where it was the influence that kind of got you to buy it, but it was really the marketing, which was the story, that made that decision? Like, that's what I'm gonna do, right? And a lot of times it's word of mouth. A lot of times it's, if you've never bought in something before and you're making a purchase for the first time, a lot of times you're gonna seek, not necessarily, but sometimes you will seek approval of others, but you'll probably look for other reviews of other people that have bought in this thing if you're questioning it. And it's through their story, right? Their testimonial, there's their experience with whatever it is going to drive your decision. So if 9 out of 10 people that you read a report on give it a crummy review, as much as you were influenced to buy whatever it is, you're going to have some second thoughts now, aren't you? You're going to want to try another company. You're going to want to take some time to think about it and then read 10 more reviews to see, wow, 9 out of 10 gave it a crummy review. I don't think I want this anymore, but it's kind of my only choice. Why don't I go read 10 more? And then what do you find out? 8 or 9 of them also leave crummy reviews. And you're like, okay, well, fabricated stories or not, doesn't matter. Those stories, if they're believable and people believe that there's a real person behind it, it's going to drive the decision. So that's why reputation is a big deal. Because reputation is somebody's story, it's their origin story mixed in with their vision, right? So where somebody is now, it's kind of a mix of their backstory and their origin story and their vision. So when their reputation's tarnished through stories, that is what's going to drive a prospect's decision on whether or not they're going to do business. So that's all I have for you today. I hope you gained some value out of this. You can go to the website, results-required.com. Just make sure you put that little tag in front of it with the HTTPS. Because, websites are all whatever with security features and certificates. I just don't want you to go to a dead link. And you could sign up to my email list. I don't send you any spam. I don't do anything weird with your email. I will give you a complimentary copy of my breakthrough results blueprint, and it's still in a work in progress a little bit. That's why it's free, but as of now, or whenever you're reading this or watching this, listening to this, I don't know about reading this, but it could be if there's a transcription on the bottom. Have a nice day.